forward to a healthy discussion from my esteemed panelists. And as we said, now creating next generation workplaces. But then, what do we think about a next generation workplace? I can perceive it differently, whereas now my friends here could perceive it differently. So I would like to invite my panelists, going from now, starting from Aman, what would you now perceive of a next generation workplace? How do you define it, or what it means to you, a next generation workplace?
Sure, thanks Vikas, and good afternoon everyone once again. From a technology company perspective, we've really been muddling over this for a very long time now, and of course there's so much evolution that's happening with workspaces and how we interact with them. We heard panelists in the morning and some thoughts coming in on how absolutely disrupted it's become in the last 2 or 3 years. So we feel like the future of workspaces would be more employee-centric, and the way we want to do more employee-centric workspaces is through empowering them with the technology that they can take control over their environment and their workspace and physical space. Yeah, this is also vital in order to bring people back to work and implement those hybrid workspace strategies that we are all talking about. While we are trying to secure and we are trying to ensure that we give the best workspace experience to employees, there's also the back end of it, which is picking up that information of employee preference, analyzing it, and ensuring that we build the future of future workspaces around that. So part of this strategy of empowering people is also to sort of, at the same time, learn what they want, what kind of rooms they want, what kind of desks do they prefer, what temperature do they prefer, what lighting do they prefer, and try and incorporate that back into the AI engine or the platforms that power these buildings at the back end, to then learn from employees constantly and then evolve. And I think that's where things sort of come together, tying it with real estate and utilization of space and other workspace experiences elements to really try and see how we can maybe have the 3 elements, the people, the spaces, and the infrastructure sort of talking to each other on a single platform. And that's how we see it going forward as the future of work.
Thanks, Aman. Thanks, and a great perspective now. And you being representing Siemens, and we all know that's a great organization as far as technology is concerned. Now I'd like to now go to my friend Deven. Deven, what is your understanding about next generation workplace?
As I commented during the previous panel discussion, I think this is still work in progress. We can't exactly say how the future workplace would evolve. There are multiple theories going on in terms of whether you create a office for 60 or 70% people, and rest 20% can work from home. Hybrid workplace, you create an office like a social club. So all these theories are being discussed. I don't think we have reached to a conclusion. Having said that, I think where we're heading now is, and what the trend we are seeing is, a lot of our clients are actually involving people to understand how they want their office to be like, what kind of facilities they want, because whilst we are used to working from a traditional office, but now people have started comparing their workplace. I was reading an article that earlier organizations used to choose the employees. Now it's the other way around. Employees choose the organization. And it's become more of a HR-driven activity. So I think inclusion of people in deciding what they want in their offices, also in terms of how they want to operate. Again, as it's said that one size doesn't fit all, so each organization has to go through a different solution for this. You have the workplace strategy done. You also do a change management. So you don't want people to come to office and be shocked to see their office created in a different way, which they may or may not like. Now, this is something which, as we are coming back to office, we have to have that inclusivity of people to, tell us about how they want the office to be done in terms of biophilia or having, 6 feet distance. I don't think that's practical, because at one point of time there was a debate going on that you create a 6 feet distance between 2 workstations. Eventually we'll come back to something which is mix of all. So whether we have satellite offices, we work on hub and spoke, we have flexible offices, we create those social clubs. I think it's too early to say that what is the final outcome of the next gen workplace.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks. Interesting insights. And now I like your point when you say now one size does not fit all. And then we have been hearing that over the last 24 months. And thank you for your insights. Now I'd like to now call my friend Penny. If you could give us a perspective as to what your understanding is about a next gen workplace.
Very complex and topic and subject. Everyone has their own take on what it's going to be like. And I think this word hybrid, simple to pronounce and simple to spell, is so complicated that how do we decipher what it really means to individuals and what does it mean to different organizations, different industries. So I think it's taking the cue from Devin and everyone that we are still evolving. But just to look a little ahead, I think the exciting times, I would look at the architect world being super creative, coming up with spaces which are attractive, meeting requirements of individuals. Health and wellness, how do we plug that into our space models and make sure that it's not a special activity, but it's part of the whole flow of the workspace and of work routine. And I think environment sustainable programs are going to be on top of the line after the pandemic. I mean, we are still we don't know it's gone or it's still there. So I think those would play a major role of how we think and how we start evolving our workspace. And to, sort of spin the coin on its head, nothing really may change so fast because of this, dilemma of really what should we do, because it's investment. It's a lot of money every company is spending. So do they really want to make these radical changes just now and then after 3-4 years realize it didn't work? So I think it's stop, step back, breathe, and take some time to really review.
Thanks, Penny. Interesting perspective, and I like your point. Now, when you say there's no need to rush, there's always a time now to introspect and see what is right, what is not. And I love your point on being super creative. Okay, so that's something we have all known now, that it comes as a hallmark from Microsoft. And you have proved it in the project you did at Noida. So thank you. So now moving on to my friend Arnab from Colliers. Arnab, what's your perspective? How do you perceive now next generation workplace to be?
First of all, good afternoon to everyone present, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this esteemed panel. As far as I'm concerned, the future of the workplace is, I'll just keep it very simple. It needs to be fluid, it needs to be sustainable, and it needs to be smart. So there are different ways of achieving these 3 adjectives, but that's what I feel the trend is. And the pandemic did allow people to pause and ponder over what the next office would be. But these are the 3 main pillars on which the new office will be designed.
Thanks, Arnab. That's brief and crisp. Love that. Thank you. So moving on to you, Jayesh, and as you represent Edifice and one of the big design firms in India, from your perspective, how do you now think about a next generation workplace?
Good afternoon, everybody. We were wondering whether the office space continues to have the same relevance as it used to 2 years ago. And we also questioned uh, as the pandemic wanes, will employees be interested in coming back to the office? And what we discovered was that the definition of the office is changing. And it is no longer about where you work, it's about what you do that matters. And we find that this, this shift in the way you look at productivity and work opens up tremendous creative potential for architects, and it really pushes us to look beyond the playbook that organizations have, because now we're not dealing with organizations, we are directly dealing with users. And I read something very interesting a few days ago. Katerina, who is the HR lead for Spotify in the US, she said it very elegantly. She said, diversity is inviting someone to a party. Inclusion is asking that person to dance. And acceptance is when you play their favorite song at a party. So I think that the idea is moving towards listening to people and catering directly, not just, we spoke about activity-based work for a long time, which said that people work in different ways. But we never took into account that there are also different types of people who want to then work in different places. So now we're looking at a more people-centric way, trying to look at office spaces more from a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. I think that holds tremendous potential for us.
Thanks, Jayesh, and a very interesting perspective what you told about now the Spotify HR head, diversity, inclusion, and acceptance. Great, thank you for that. Now, coming to you, Gaurav, heading a firm like 75F, now you leading it across APAC, how do you perceive a next generation workplace to be?
I tend to play a lot of tennis, and recently I read the autobiography of Rafael Nadal, and in it he mentions that the fitness level expected of the top tennis players in the world is, in his words, an insane level of fitness. It's one of the most popular sports there is in the world, played in hundreds of countries. We all know the kind of money that they earn. But a top tennis player is expected to be a sprinter. He's expected to play matches lasting 5 hours, 6 hours. He's expected to have a lot of upper body strength, expected to have a lot of lower body strength to keep running, expected to have a lot of mental toughness, because at that level it comes down to a mental game. So the analogy is that of a next generation workplace where it is all of these things. And I think everyone has kind of encapsulated it, so I won't repeat the same, but today's workplace needs to be measurable, it needs to be manageable, it needs to be available, highly available, it needs to be flexible, and that's an oft misused word, but different things can be asked of the workplace. And these days this is becoming a big deal. It's to be very efficient. So keep it short and hopefully sweet, but I think a next-gen workplace is supposed to cover all these aspects.
Thanks, Gaurav, thanks. And then interesting analogy you gave with Rafael Nadal. We all know now, and I'm sure all of you would have seen him winning the Australian Open at that age. Now, not many can dream of it, but he made it happen. So thank you, and good insights from the perspective now. And apart from the points now what my esteemed panel covered, I would like to say the next generation workplace to me should be now the one which helps in weaving the fabric of culture. Because today organizations are not able to get that culture element together. How do you get those social gatherings, those collaborations going? And culture is an integral part of any organization. And as we see now during the pandemic, there were a lot of employees who have moved from one organization to another, okay? And there are a lot of people who have joined, but typically the contact has only been on the screen. The next generation workplace to me should be the one which fosters that cultural element into that. How do you bring that? And to me, the other point which strongly comes out is, how do you get an element of home within the workspace? If you see, I'm sure now all of us who have worked from home won't have wear formal clothes. At least now we were wearing all were in a pajamas or those clothes which were very comfortable to us. Today, apart from a few tech companies permitting you to do it, how many are not allowing that? But then, can we go on to that extent now, apart from the technology element, apart from that now, interactions, latest equipment, artificial intelligence, these elements of which we have very humane touch to it. And then, well-being and health is prime importance. Because what we have seen in the last 2 years, nothing stands over your health and well-being. That's an integral part and an expectation which every employee wants to have. So having put my thoughts on the table, I would like to invite Penny and understand from her that how important is the end user perspective while you are planning a next generation workplace, and what are the factors or pointers which an organization like yours keep in mind before designing the same?
Let me step back a little. When we build spaces, or all of us build spaces, there is a lot of thought from a company, from a people, from a build, from cost. It all marries up to a project. So after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, we did a lot of investment as a company, and we reached out to our global research teams. We have a global research team who partners with Gensler globally. And they did a research work first across the globe, that means Americas, EMEA, and Asia. And then we zeroed it onto Asia because trends were different. Americans, everyone, when they build their home, they have a home office. I mean, it's just a given. While we here in India never thought anybody's going to work from home. Work meant you went out of the house and came back home. So some of those differences, some other nuances of, economy and, how people can afford having technology at home, etc. And then we zeroed onto India. And really amazing, and I was part of the interviews that we conducted with different generations of people working. Very senior leaders, mid-management, level 2 managers, campus hires, new joinees for only 1 year in the company. And then we went out into the universities and colleges. We did first year, second year, third year, fourth year students, and we interviewed people who were at the cusp of getting a job, and we interviewed people who had just decided on which company they want to join and what were the criteria they were thinking through as they were choosing where to work. And it's interesting, this research was really interesting because till the mid-management level, everyone said, it's fine. I look at the brand of a company. I look at the comfort I get. So as it came to the younger generations and then come to Gen Z, who were very specific what they want. They said, I remember some of the younger people actually asking me very pertinent questions. What are you going to do for us? I do not want to sit in an air-conditioned environment for 8 hours. I want to step out and work. I'm sharing some of the responses also. One youngster said, is there place for me if I've had a bad day? Is there place for me to vent? Is there place for me to really feel angry? Does your culture allow that as a company? To us, what does it mean? Do you want a punching bag or do you want to sleep? What do you want to do? Do you know? And how do you want that? Then they're asking, how is your building going to be if you're defining it from inside outside? I do want a place where I can collaborate outside, I want to sit under a tree, I want to swing, or whatever, you know. So it was so interesting. Well-being, health, environment topped the agenda of our discussions in this research. Everybody is talking about these questions. And they are not looking at brand values anymore. They are not looking at your XXX billion-dollar company. They are looking at the culture, they are looking at what you're building for them and how it's going to come up. The other very interesting point that was thrown up was community interaction. What is the impact a company is having for the community that we are going to be operating in? What are you doing? There was this young girl, I think she was in her first year of college. She asked me, she said, where are you going to get your daily supplies like milk, fruit, vegetables? Can we have a local, farm which the company can sort of own or have stuff there? And you're generating employment. I mean, they're thinking way ahead of us. I mean, I think I was dated actually in front of them because the questions, the way they're thinking about it, they are not thinking of I, me, myself. They are thinking holistically. They want to involve everyone around. So I think it's very interesting times, like I said earlier. I'm super excited of what's going to come and how we are going to partner with all our partners, project teams, architects, our thinking of selection of leasing out spaces. How are we going to bring all this together to really have the attraction for the best talent?
Thanks, Penny. An interesting perspective, and I myself can vouch for that when we say now the kind of productivity levels we see across the population. Having been privileged enough to have worked at the Microsoft Hyderabad campus for 2.5 years and then at the SAP campus in Bangalore for 3.5 years, your stress levels really go down a lot because you are in the midst of nature, you are just stepping out of your work area, you are amongst the nature, amongst the greens, and then you are very different. And I have seen it over a period of time and then can relate to it, but great thoughts. And then who knows, tomorrow there might be a scenario where organizations are looking at now their own economy to sustain.
Yeah.
You never know. Maybe that's the future. The day might come. Thank you, Penny, for the perspective. Moving on, we all know technology has been the biggest disruption over the last decade or so. And bringing in Aman. Aman, do you think that India is keeping pace on the technology front now when you see what technology is being implemented globally across to create a next generation workplace? Or you still feel there is a way to go and we are still doing the catching up game?
Thanks, Vikas. I think it's a mixed bag, yeah, and technology is a very wide platform. So I think in some cases from our experience, we've seen India has been a trendsetter, but there are definitely some platforms or in some opportunities from a technology front where we can definitely learn from the West or from, let's say, UAE or Australia. So I think one of the things that we can sort of adopt is right from the design stage, talking about a digital twin and maybe tweak the buying process. I mean, easier said than done. It's definitely a huge adjustment or a huge change in the way we go about design to commissioning to handing over on operations. But a digital twin layer, for example, is still something in India which would be at a fairly nascent stage. Yeah. However, I'm so happy that there is so much talk and there's so much traction about topics like this. But on the other hand, I think we've done projects here which the West has then sort of got inspired from and trying to then implement it in their offices over there. For example, we're doing some kind of wireless sensors, we're doing integrated services, we're doing platforms here. And I think India provides a huge amount of opportunity, especially when it comes to smart offices. Yeah, we are a very fast growing market. And there's so much potential to experiment. There's just so much potential to do so many things here, which I think I wouldn't discount India in any way. I think we can really become a benchmark. Although having said that, like I said, we can improve on certain things from the West as well. So I feel it's a mixed bag.
Thanks, Aman. It's a great perspective, and happy to know that India is doing well. Now, the second part of the question to you is, do you think any future trends which will redefine the way we work from what we are doing today? Anything which you is in public domain, or do you have insights on which the teams are working globally to create, which will redefine the way we work moving forward?
From a workplace perspective, again, I think there's a lot of inclusion that's going to come from the employee standpoint. Usually, the way a building would be run would not only be restricted to the facility or the admin team, but I think there'll be a lot of influence coming in from what the employees want. And like Penny ma'am rightly mentioned, really understanding what the employee wants here. It's not just like a one-time thing at the time of recruitment, but it's also continuously learning on a day-to-day basis what they want, and then try to see how we could incorporate that in the building while we are still learning from the employees. So I think we are also looking at platforms to capture their expectations better and have more of a feedback mechanism on a regular basis. And to get that feedback, it's not something that we do surveys or we put a feedback panel outside every office. It has to be an integral part of your SOP as well, right? So the way you operate offices is through a platform which also not only allows to run that SOP, but also allows you to capture employee preference and then put that into the building platform. On the other hand, I think those are all on the software front, but I think there is a lot of evolution that's happening on the hardware front also, because I think the hardware needs to keep up with all this software, right? So we want to do more with less. So we want to have, let's say, multi-purpose wireless sensors, or like what 75F is doing here. It's incredible, right? We are trying to extract so much data, and there's a lot of data coming in. There's a lot of variety of data coming in at a big velocity. We need to learn to sort of manage all that better. So I think those are the trends which will sort of define what we can expect from the near future.
Yeah, thank you, Aman. And then just now I'll add to it. So do you think the day is still far away when we will have driverless cars fetching in our employees to work, drones guarding our campuses, and now we don't need an access card, it will be a facial recognition for an employee to walk all through the campus? How far do you think it is from today?
I think some of it is also happening right now. I think it's not so bad. Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited about what can be and how my next 5 years at a workspace would be. Facial recognition we are doing. We are doing a lot of AI based analytics on safety front also, not only office spaces but also manufacturing units and all of that stuff. It's a very hard question, but I can't really put a number on it, but I'm very optimistic it's going to be happening very soon, is how I can probably answer that.
Thanks, Aman.
Driverless car in Bangalore.
I know. That'd be interesting.
Well, Tesla is coming soon, so we never know.
And they failed in US.
To you, now from a design perspective, now do you think the clients are being open to embrace that kind of openness, or you can say that feeling of something new which is there, or they still have those preconceived notions or overarching theme under which they want to work on? Because I'm sure now for designing or creating any next generation workplace, a design is a critical element, and unless and until you are given a free hand or a free flowing thoughts and ideas for ideation, it does not come out in the best possible manner. And how do you perceive it, and what can the industry do to facilitate the designers in expressing themselves openly?
I think it's a very important question, because all the work that is happening in this space is today intensely collaborative. So one can no longer say that this is the architect's domain, this is the engineer's domain, this is the technologist's domain. So we are talking about technology, we're talking about facilities management, we're talking about performance of the building, and we are also talking about the experience of the people. for the designer, one of the joys of creating a space is to imagine how the user will experience it, whether it will be a memorable experience for them, and whether it will enrich their life or their productivity in a certain way. So, you know, the whole fact that we've been questioning the validity of the office, there are a few things we've discovered. The first is that people enjoy working at home because it's comfortable. They know the place, they are free from judgment, they're free from the politics of the workplace. They can, exactly like you said, they can dress the way they want. In fact, I was wondering whether I should wear a suit or will a shirt suffice, or whether I should wear a t-shirt for today's event, right? The second thing is that you also have the opportunity to decide your work-life balance, especially caregivers. If I have senior citizens at home, if I have children, then I decide how I want to balance that. And the third thing is, depends on who I am as a person. Most people are not extroverts. There are also some introverts who prefer to work from home because then they can focus and bring their own energy to the process. So I think the potential for design for us is to create these kind of spaces for different people in the new workplace. And I'll give you some examples. One of the projects we're working on, the client told us that, you know, we have started hiring people who are on the autism spectrum, or at least we have started becoming more and more aware that we are having people in the workplace who have special needs, and you can't put them into a neighborhood just because they're working with a certain group. So do we consider giving a quiet place? Is that acceptance or is it exclusion to say that we'll give you a separate place? Those are also questions that designers are asking these days. And it also comes with its own challenges, you know. For example, one challenge is scale. The context of an Indian office is there are hundreds of people. If you start designing for each individual, you can't design an office with 10,000 spaces. The second challenge is acceptance of technology. There is a willingness to explore new technology, but there is always a gap between deploying a technology and the end user accepting that technology and using it. I still have hang-ups using Zoom, for example, after 2 years of the pandemic. You know, sometimes when I want to have a quick collaboration. And the third thing I would say is the ethics of using that technology in a next-gen workplace. And I just want to touch upon the facial recognition that you said, because it came up in one of our projects, and one of the team members said, I am not comfortable. If this is the technology you're discussing to be deployed in our workplace, I am not comfortable letting go my privacy to that extent that, you know, the office is monitoring where I am through facial recognition. So I think there is also the ethical layer over here. But by and large, I am extremely optimistic in principle, because we are moving away from designing space for an organization to designing space for people. So different organizations have different ways of approaching this, but some of them are talking about home-like space, some of them are talking about hospitality-like space, where they actually have a concierge desk and someone who's waiting and say, welcome Mr. or Miss so-and-so, how was your day? And you know, that improves their experience of being there. But most people are focusing on understanding how not just each task, but each person works differently, and enabling them to do that work, whether they decide to be in office or at home. So we came up with this concept called work from home, from office, and which is, we've been trying in a few of our projects now, which says that your office space is ultimately a space. It can be designed in whichever way you want. There could be parts of your office which are more professional or formal, and there could be parts of the office which are more informal or casual, and they both have different degrees of privacy. So the kind of design challenge, but also the design potential that comes with designing these different characteristics of spaces is quite immense. And I think the important thing to remember is that organizations want people to come to office, because the culture of the organization is built in the office. And as a country, we are very community-driven people. We are not, very private or independent people. So organizations want that, so they encourage us to think out of the box. They encourage us to come up with very different solutions, and they are also very excited when the associates in the organization react positively to these things. So I think the potential is very much there. And I'm very optimistic about new age workspaces.
Thanks, Jayesh. And then when you rightly put it as that yes, the organizations want people to come back to work, they want to create or extend those kind of facilities. Do you also feel there is a sense of you can say, a little bit now whether the employees will respond in the same manner, because what we have seen is organizations being skeptical, because what we have seen during these times, we have seen cases like moonlighting, okay, employees taking up multiple jobs or maybe also freelancing, we don't know. So organizations, whereas now quite a few big ones, they are very open, they want to embrace their employees, have trust and faith with them, but the employees also need to respond the same way. So are you getting some sense that the organizations don't want to go all out? They are a little skeptical because we were not seeing it earlier, but over the last few months, that's the thought process where it is moving to.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think the larger discussion under which these next gen workspaces coming is within a cultural review of what work life means, right? For example, just because an office is being built, there is no guarantee that everyone would want to come into work. There are so many issues. For example, health, safety, hygiene. These are all riding on the top of everyone's mind today. They don't know if they want to share the same cafeteria with 200 other people, right? So the approach we're looking at, and pardon me for using the term hybrid over here, is people want to have 1 foot in the office and 1 foot at home, and they say that, okay, let's work with an attendance ratio of 30% or 50%, and then we will tweak our policy to encourage people to spend, let's say, 2 days in office and 3 days at home. So I think it is not yet at a level where designers are involved in the creation of that culture or policy at an organizational level, but certainly there is a little bit of feedback we are able to offer to clients, and there is also the willingness to accept that feedback and share their experience also with us, so that then we can, exactly like they said, we are very much in the process of creating what that looks like. Now, I don't think any of us has the answer, but I would say that this cultural component, being wary of whether everyone wants to come, and then if they come, how do you respect their health, how do you respect their privacy, that is taking a lot of importance.
Thanks, Jayesh. Then moving on to you, Dipen, you heading one of the largest PMC firms in India, Knight Frank, and then now with your exposure and expertise, how do you think now a PMC can play a critical role in creating a next-gen workplace, and what are the few of the challenges you face while doing so?
You know, first I was just listening to him in terms of how people are, I have a mic. So how people are reluctant to come to office, and especially to a cafeteria with 200 people, but evenings you go out, the bars and the restaurants are full. So I don't know why it's just limited to workplace. You see here, who's maintaining social distance? Okay. That was on a lighter note. You know, the challenge we're facing when we are discussing workplace with the clients is they're understanding what they want. There's still that gap in understanding what their employees finally would like. So, you know, there's a term called scope creep. You know, you decide a scope today, and then after a week you say, no, you know, I've seen something in Google, I've seen something in Microsoft, I think it might work. So there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what the final outcome they want. Then we talk about the stakeholder involvement. Now, stakeholders are the employees, stakeholders are the consultants, stakeholders are the facility management team. So we still don't have everybody on one table to discuss and decide what the final office would look like. So I think that's where we're facing a challenge, because so far people have not experienced the new workplace. So it's still work in progress. So once they come in, then they would come in. So, you know, we talk about workplace strategy where the surveys are being done. We talk about change management where, you know, people are told in advance what they should expect when they are back in the office. So these are the challenges, because, you know, as project managers, we are committed to delivering an office within a time frame, within a budget, and with a quality. But if so many changes are there, the project is so dynamic these days that we don't know what the final outcome would be. Besides this, we also are facing a challenge in terms of supply chain. We've seen in last 2 years, we had stop, go in terms of when we're building out the offices or even, doing the commercial buildings. So how dependable the supply chain is. So we have to create a supply chain which, in spite of all these restrictions and all these challenges, we can carry out the work without any disruptions. Now, then the final thing is, we talk about sustainability, we talk about ESG, is do the architects come up with, and Fancy is here, she'll love this, circular design, how we can, do a circular design in terms of reusing the products. So, I think these are the challenges, and as I said earlier, we're still going through a learning curve, and you would know a lot of organizations are still not sure what they want to do, and that's the reason if you see, this is a trend of going for the enterprise model, because they want a short-term office, they don't want to invest in the offices, they just want to see if it works, and maybe then come up with a solution which their employees would like. Now, I like the term which said, going outdoors, sitting under a tree and working. Bangalore has that luxury. I don't think Delhi or Bombay can afford that, right? So, we have to consider the local challenges also. And what has happened, I can say in last 2 years, the occupiers have become very demanding when it comes to the type of building they're looking at. So that's where we come in. We identify the challenges. If that building can, support the infrastructure which a client wants for his employees. So, there are multiple challenges we face, and we're just dealing with them as we, are getting out of this pandemic wave.
Thanks, Devin. So I would like to say that now, just to add to your point now, that do you feel we as now an industry body, when it comes now together, are not able to visualize how the future will look like? Because if we put it up in a better perspective, like now an integral now, a designer, a PMC, and maybe a technology expert, all coming together and showing now, making this is how the blueprint will look like now. This is how your campus will be. This is how the life will be, say 10 years from the time we go live. I believe, and then there are no, you can say, living examples for us to prove that. Then people will be more receptive, more open to embrace that. Do you feel once we do it, and like we see now it happening in the western parts of the world, where they are now much advanced when it comes to now a real estate perspective or a FM perspective. So there, that acceptance or that now keenness to adapt to those scenarios is much higher than we find in this part of the world.
So, I don't see any difference between what is happening in the West and what's happening in India, because 10, 15 years back, we would follow what West was doing. Now it's the equal platform for both. I think how we can, have that acceptance from the people is, use technologies like virtual reality. Show them that, this is how your office would look like. Is that acceptable or not? So I think technology would help us, visualize what the final outcome is without even building it out.
Fair point. Penny, you'd like to add something?
Yeah. So I think, Devin, you brought up a very good point on the collective collaboration is actually one of the pain points, because collaborate is a nice word, but it's so complex because the round table has too many different thought processes, and there's no leader over there who can say that, okay, should we close it on A or B or C? Everyone wants to be inclusive, everyone wants to be collaborative, and that's where I think those pieces in the puzzle fall. And you're right, as an industry body of the way we work, we have to take the lead and really go forward rather than, back it with research, back it with data, back it with some kind of pilots that we've experienced and done, and then present a holistic plan and try to get that level. I find that is where we need work still.
Absolutely.
I'll
and
just quote one example. Back in 2007, we did an office for Philips, and where they brought in all the businesses under one roof. And those days, this workplace strategy was a very new thing even for me to understand why they wanted. So at that point of time, they actually created a workplace for just 70% of their employees back in 2007. And they also, wanted to promote this idea to other organizations and asked us to bring the clients to show them how the thing works, because everything was flexible. 15, 16 years after that was done, we're talking about flexibility, we're talking about hybrid. So, it's all about acceptance and understanding how that whole thing works. And if everybody is comfortable working with the flexible model, which I'm not, I'm sorry to say I want my own desk, but yes, I think with new generation coming in, they are more flexible in working, they can work anywhere, sitting under a tree or sitting on the cafeteria.
Absolutely, as you said, now again, that was a point I was wanting to make, that now openness and being more receptive to seeing if you are able to visualize what is there. And then Penny, you rightly brought up a point that we know how great an organization like Microsoft, they have their own center of excellence for the real estate world, okay, where they do all processes, all that, and they don't want to reinvent the wheel because they have been running their facilities since the 80s in US. And everything which comes up now, a problem statement or something what they have to do, there is a process which is laid down.
I would request Penny to, allow us to show their office to the client so that, this is a live example.
She will be more than happy. And then just when we are talking about now seeing seated in open spaces and working, I don't know how many of you have the privilege now to be at the Seattle campus of Microsoft. There is a tree house there, and that's the most sought after place by each and every employee there. So those are the things which now we say, when we talk about in this part of the world, they have already done it. So that's what I was referring to. But yes, we lead on quite a few other initiatives as well. But then if we can have that East meeting West, it'll be great. Thank you, Dipen. Now moving on, Gaurav, coming back to you. We all know that now the HVAC solutions which your organizations provide, they are big power guzzlers and they play an integral role now in how we define a next generation of workplace. And do you feel that those will be the ones which can further be optimized moving forward? Because there are very, very few clients who are adopting that solution at the moment. And then what role is your organization playing in now? Because energy demands are going or rising higher. What role is your organization playing in that creating that next generation of workplace?
Sure, thanks, Vikas. 5 minutes may not be enough for this, but I'll do my best. First of all, we provide the controls and automation layer on top of the HVAC system. So not the HVAC systems per se, but rather the intelligence layer on top of it. Now, all of us sort of know that HVAC systems are important, but let's just try and put in perspective how important in our lives. Buildings today worldwide constitute about 40% of the total energy footprint of the planet, right? The rest is homes and transportation and the rest of it, but buildings are about 40%. In buildings, HVAC is generally about 60% of the total energy consumption, 50 to 70, give or take, let's take 60. So that's about 24% of the total energy consumed on the planet. 1 in every 4 kilowatt hours is HVAC systems, right? Parlay that into the carbon footprint, the greenhouse gases that are being emitted. It's about 33% that buildings generate, right? And then again, you trace it back to HVAC, so that's roughly about 60% of that. So about 20% or 1 in every 5 kgs of greenhouse gases are emitted through air conditioning systems. Is it important for the future of the planet and the viability of the planet? Probably. We need to do something about it. Number two, we spend about, 60% of our waking hours in the office when we used to go to office, and hopefully, soon everyone is going to be back in office. Roughly 80% of all the complaints that come from commercial spaces tend to be related to HVAC. Hopefully after we've deployed it in your building, the complaints have come down, but 80% of the complaints are related to HVAC. So, it's important. Now, what exactly are the things that can be done to improve it and to, design better, optimize better, build better? First and foremost, and there are a lot of architects in the audience and in the group, it has tended to happen that the design of the building, the design of the lighting systems tends to happen first and tends to happen in isolation, and then whatever calculations are done are then passed over to the MEP experts, the consultants, and they have to manage with whatever it is. So if there's a certain fenestration that has been taken, a certain level of passive solar heat gain which is supposed to come into the building, there's very little that the MEP consultant can do about it. He just has to manage. If there's a certain height which has been decided upon, and these days the trend seems to be to have true ceilings without the false ceilings, it adds a lot of complexity. The MEP consultant has to then manage this complexity. Whereas if he's involved at the outset in terms of recommending climate appropriate design, maybe not the best place to have 100% open, for the sake of letting in more lighting. It's a lot cheaper to have artificial lighting with daylight harvesting perhaps than to be oversizing your chillers and to be oversizing your air handler units and later correcting the problem. So doing it together and sitting together with the various domain experts and doing the calculations for heat loads and solar heat gains and all the rest of it is extremely important. Number three, we often talk of OE square, right? OE square is the most important thing to decide when you are choosing your HVAC strategy. And it's a balancing act. So the first OE stands for occupant experience. Why is air conditioning there? It's to make people feel comfortable. And these days it goes beyond temperature and humidity and airflow and ventilation. It is about air quality, right? You're talking about CO2 levels, you're talking about VOCs, you're talking about PM 2.5. These days people are asking about PM 1.0, you're talking about AQIs. Everything needs to be measured. So occupant experience is extremely important. At the same time, the other side of the coin is the operational efficiency. So if you're going high on occupant experience, then there's a price to be paid when it comes to the operational efficiency. Why are each of these important? Now, for the occupant experience, if you increase the ventilation levels from 6 liters per second per person to 10 liters per second per person, it improves the employee productivity by about 1 to 2%. Now, improving the employee productivity by 1 to 2%, that is just 5 minutes extra that a person will not take a break or not go to the coffee machine and moan and complain or not go outside the building. 5 minutes saved in the day because you've got better conditions will pay for your entire ventilation system, your treated fresh air system inside your building. So paying attention to the occupant experience is extremely important. Having temperature too high or too low. Now, if you're maintaining about 19 or 20 degrees Celsius, which we find is often the case in some of the older buildings, or on the other hand, having pockets which are running at 28 to 30 degrees Celsius reduces the productivity of people by up to 10%. And most of the buildings that you have, clients like you have, are mostly knowledge workers, people who are doing things which require a lot of concentration and focus. Harvard study has indicated that if you lower the VOCs by up to 25%, you can improve the cognitive abilities by 100% of people who are working there. So occupant experience is extremely important. Let's talk about the energy aspect of HVAC systems. Why is it important? There was a test carried out a few years ago, I think 2013 or 14 in Paris. 2 identical buildings, 110,000 square feet each, similar mechanical systems in place, air handler units, chillers, similar vintage. One of them ran with the normal system in place, with the BMS and whatever. The other system put in place one strategy, just one out of the energy efficiency strategies, and you can have about 8 or 9 different strategies. So they put in place demand control ventilation. Right? So whatever air is required in a certain zone, depending on the occupancy that's required, they put in place control systems, dampers, sensors, and what have you to do that. The first building had a total EPI, or Energy Performance Index, of about 126 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum, only for the HVAC systems. The second building was able to reduce it by deploying one strategy, just one out of 8 strategies, to 78 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum. So that's a reduction of something like 34% or something, just by deploying one thing. Now, how does this translate into dollars and cents? The extra cost that you would incur in deploying something like this is about 1 to 2% of the cost of the building. You can make a building sustainable by investing an extra 5% or so. And studies have shown that this increases the market value of a building by up to 10%. It increases the rentals by up to 5%. So it makes perfect sense to deploy energy efficient systems in place. But there's often a balancing act between occupant experience and operational efficiency. Lastly, I think one needs to pay a lot of attention to the appropriate kind of HVAC technologies that one needs to deploy. You have multiple technologies. You have fan coil units, you have ductable splits, you have direct expansion units, you have VRFs, you have AHUs and chillers. So for the kind of climate that you're in, for the kind of use of your building, are you a small building? Are you a medium building? Are you a building which is working 24/7? Are you, for example, in an area, if you're in Whitefield, for example, all new buildings are banned to have water-cooled chillers. You have no choice but to go in for an air-cooled system. If you are extremely high on energy efficiency, then you might want to think about having an air-water system versus an air-air system. Because an air-water system, the pumps use a lot less energy than what the fans use when it comes to providing the higher levels of ventilation that are required in order to cool the building. So there's no one-size-fits-all. Depending on where you are, depending on what kind of building you're putting in place, depending on how big you are, how small you are, how flexible you want it to be. For example, the life of a typical HVAC equipment would be about 15 to 20 years. You feel that you may want to change your location from one building to the other. Don't be putting in chillers on top of your roof in that case. You might want to look at something else.
Absolutely.
So just to summarize, one should pick the right strategy. One should have all the domain experts sitting together and working out all these, because often from the MEP side there can be very useful design inputs that can come back in. Thirdly, the right kind of technology which is there. And last but not the least, to make a building smart, put in the right kind of sensors, put in the right kind of controllers, put in the right kind of software. It will pay for itself.
Thanks, Gaurav, and you interestingly covered all the aspects of the productivity and all, which are proven by Harvard Business Studies. So thank you. But just I'd like to give an example here when we talk about all these. There is one building which is the biggest in terms of volume across the world. Again, very close to Microsoft campus. It's the Boeing building at Renton. The only facility which manages double LE aircrafts, and the building does not have any HVAC solution, just regulating the flow of air. We know the extremities of climates in Seattle. They maintain a temperature of 65 degree Fahrenheit in the building, and that's the biggest building in terms of volume across the globe. So in case you are traveling that side, do take a tour of that building. It's amazing to have that experience. So Arnab, coming to you, the last one, it might be a tricky question, but I'll leave you with that, and then we need to wrap it up in the next 2 minutes. So we've all discussed over the last 1 hour, how do we design or create a next-gen workplace. But we all know a house, a apartment, a condominium, it can be different, but it does not translate to a home unless and until a family moves in. So we can all design those workplaces but how do we get those employees back to work? What do you feel this group or our fraternity needs to do to make that happen?
Today we are anyway discussing creating next-gen workplaces. So new age workplaces is what I was told. So let me share some old school thoughts on that. See, when we start designing any office space, I think today, after the 2 years of pandemic, it is very important that organizations actually know how their work has changed, the nature of work, as well as the people. You know, people also have changed thanks to the pandemic. So it is important that you first do a proper survey of what you want to build. You know, a lot of people don't, lot of organizations don't do that. That is very important for you to set the brief also of the design or the location where you want to move in. The first stage obviously is the building that you want to choose, and secondly the kind of workplace that you want to build. So doing a proper survey using the right team is very important. It can throw off a lot of pointers which will help you later. Secondly, choose or value design. Choose your designer wisely. You know, once you choose them, motivate them, help them to, you know, because they are the guy who will take your brief and take it forward. So if you motivate them, they can help you to make a statement, they can help you to make your space sustainable, they can help you to make it a, you know, make culture count. All whatever you have as an organization goals can become if you have the right set of designers with you. Thirdly, you need to be aware about all the latest technologies which are available to make your workplace better. Now, what I've seen, a lot of the MEP consultants sometimes are not really aware about the new technologies which are already available. Friends like, you know, Gaurav or Aman might be more aware than them. So it is important, again, I go back to the same thing, that you choose your team wisely who are aware about the latest thing, because when you're building workplaces, and especially when you're building scale, you need to have a future-ready workplace. You need to build something which is relevant maybe 2 or 3 years down the line when the actual product comes up. So if you check all these 3 boxes, I think you'll get a workplace where your employees would love to come back.
The employers are asking those questions. We have the best-in-class campuses available. Now you talk about any big Indian tech companies, but still employees are not willing to come back.
$1 million question.
Yeah,
Throw a
that
party
is
then
something.
So
But
what will that next generation workplace be which gets them back? What is that magnet to get them
But
back?
sometimes I feel it's, see, the workplace design and environment is one aspect of getting employees back. But, you know, it's also to do with the attitude of the management, the culture. What you say, culture is not just defined by your workplace. Culture is how you interact with your employees. So I have seen very chaotic work places where I find the employees, you know, the moment you enter that workplaces, you can feel the energy level. You know, you go to, especially in Bangalore, if you enter any of these startup large-scale offices, workplace, you know, but you can see the employees are working very happily in that kind of environment also. So it's a culmination of all the things.
To come back or not. I don't think it's employees. It's the management who doesn't want employees to come back because they're not sure what's going to happen. So this is based on a lot of discussions I had with CRE heads, because the directive has come from the US or wherever the headquarters is. Should they start office, and what will happen if, say, something happens? Who's answerable to that? So this debate whether employees want to come back, they definitely want to come back. But it's the management who needs to reassure them and get back them to the campus.
So again, you're talking about the analogy, if I can give now, whether the chicken comes first or the egg comes first again.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.